The 70s and 80s, those who grew up in it, their mindset was a little bit different. Their mentality was more family oriented. Whereas the children that they gave birth to, many of them, what they saw something that they didn't want to be a part of. They would look at who we call Big Mama or grandfather's house. They'd look at them and say that this is not the life that I want. I want more. And you had this incredible influx of people into the education system, especially college university during the
Mm.
90s and the 2000s, because they didn't want necessarily to be a factory worker or something along those lines like many of their parents were who immigrated, let's say for example, to the United States or to Canada or wherever. And when I mentioned that, I'm going to push back because you highlighted the purpose. If you look at it from a woman's perspective, if they can have a child and sustain that child without the man in that house, there's going to be a group of women that's going to do that because they can supplement their income either through spousal support, child support, or government assistance. The man
Mm.
isn't mandatory for them to help take care of the child like it was maybe in the 60s and 70s where you needed the income from the man. Now, when you flash forward, you look at it from a man's perspective. There, many of them are thinking, why should I invest in a woman this way, a marriage, so on and so forth, when I can get the sex and the kid without providing the ring,
Absolutely.
right? So you have these two dynamics who unfortunately started off as maybe a minority, but a very loud and vocal minority. And now they're
Mm.
influencing those who are in the middle who are maybe thinking, hmm, okay, I want to have a family, but I don't necessarily need to have a marriage like my grandparents did it. So why don't I go down that route? Because you see Susie down the street who's having hot girl summer every other day. She's
Mm.
living the time of her life, going on vacation, going wherever. And I don't know if I necessarily want to do that because you still gonna have the traditional men, you still gonna have the traditional women who are putting themselves in a position that in their mid to late 20s, they know that they want to build this family and create the legacy. Whereas you have these other people who are just living life very dopamine based, where they're just looking for the next hit. And I think,
Mm.
unfortunately, to your point, we've kind of got lost in that because on social media and on the news, as you mentioned, they glorify this. I couldn't remember the last time where on social media I saw something go viral where you had two people who got married and they're happily getting married and they had the festivities and things like that. Unless you go searching for it, it's not on the news. It's mostly this person died, this person got shot, this person is suffering these injuries, but you don't have the positivity like you maybe did in the 80s and 90s where you'd see stories of someone saving others or at least creating a family. So how do you help others try to navigate through that? Because it might be hard to tell someone, hey, be like me, just only watch 30 minutes of TV.
No, I don't think it's something you can teach really. What you can do, which I'm also going to give credit to one of my role models, one of my mentors. He's still alive, thank God. That's in person of Tony Robbins. Um, I listened to. I was fortunate to be in his presence. Sometimes March of last year, it was actually a total shock at an event, a leadership event in Miami, and he shared something in his book, Life Force. I think that's his latest book, and I wrote it down. I'm going to share two of them with you. He said the world has been the same over the last 100 years. He said, but a couple of things, a couple of dynamics have been consistent. And he said, if you want to observe those dynamics, you have to first study pattern. You have said everything about the pattern now. In 60s, 70s, marriage was the norm. You have to be married. You have to have a kid. The man goes out to work. The woman stays home, raise the kids. The man provides the food. The woman take makes the food, have the baby, raise the kids. Kids go ahead and repeat the process. And he said it changes again because if you study the pattern, then you have to use the pattern. Now, when you use the pattern, and that's where we are right now. You first study the pattern and see that things are like this, and then you use the pattern, and that's what people are doing right now. Like now, women have, since the World War II. I wasn't born by World War II. I was born in 1980, which makes me sometimes feel old as well, because when I see what the kids born in the 2000s do and say and act these days, I'm in shock. Like I'm just like, are we still in the same world? You know, because things have really, really, really changed. There's no The basic tenet of respect is no longer there. That you see people, you say, I still use sir and ma'am for, I don't care how old you are. Everybody is yes ma'am, yes sir. That's how I was brought up. Sometimes when I say it to some women, they are offended. They're like, why are you calling me ma'am? Am I that old? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. That is not my intention. I'm just respecting you. So you have to. And my other mentor, Dr. Miles Monroe, said the World War II changed everything, because those days when the man goes out and work and come back and take care of the family changed, because the men went to war during the World War II, and some of them were stuck out there because their bullets and guns were exhausted. So the American government, had to go call on the women in the house, like, hey, you want to make some money? Come and make the weapons. So the women were in the factories making the weapon, making the bullets for the soldiers at war, for their husbands at war to use. And they were already making some money. So by the time the men came back from war, the one that survived it, their wives were back in the factory working. She could supply her own bacon and she could buy her own gas, she could buy her own everything that time. And the man was like, hey, what's going on here? And the wife is, look, this is the new reality. We have to do it that way. And some men accepted, and since then, it did not change. It kept going worse and worse. And now, like you said, a few of them then started mentoring the larger audience. They were infiltrated, and then now we have a gazillion of them out there that said, okay, look, if your husband is giving you this, don't take it. Before, my parents only divorced because I don't know if it's something that they probably would want to share, but I don't think they could go ahead with themselves anymore. But they could have actually made it work. And I told myself that, hey, look, if I get married, whatever it takes, I'm not going to get divorced. It's never going to happen. That was something I told myself. But believe it or not, I think I survived just 14 years of that. Uh, it happened as much as, and I always say it, I had a fight of my life for my marriage. Like, no, I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to repeat the cycle. Guess what? It happened. I'm not blaming me, and I'm not going to blame her. I just think it's part of the pattern that I mentioned earlier, that when life cycle turns, it is what it is. It's your turn. But most of the time, you have to trace this thing down to the importance of the fact that it is a pattern that continues to revolve, and that's how it's going to be. So it is left for you and I to continue in our own little capacity to say, okay, are we willing to give marriage a chance again? Are we willing to raise the kind of men that we want to be? Because our father make a mistake does not mean that we have to let the pattern repeat itself. Are we willing to fix it?